The New York skyline is transforming right before our eyes.
Why New York's skinniest skyscraper ended up in court.
432 Park Avenue.
432 Park Avenue.
432 Park Avenue.
Own the apartments inside one of the most expensive buildings in New York.
Welcome to the penthouse at 432 Park Avenue.
Took their own developers to court.
The city. Some perspective here on just where the instability in the building is. In the red there.
More than 1,500 construction and design defects. And according to their complaint, many of them rose to the level of life safety issues.
Not only is it the tallest residential tower in the city, it's also the tallest in the Western.
The building is 432 Park Avenue, 1,396 feet tall, finished in 2015 on Billionaires Row, overlooking Central Park. It is a square concrete tower, 93 feet wide, rising nearly 1,400 feet into the air, a height-to-width ratio of roughly 15:1. Apartments here have rented for around $1 million a year. Jennifer Lopez and Alex Rodriguez owned a unit on the 36th floor. And according to the residents' filings, the walls creak like the inside of a wooden ship. Their complaints describe flooding, elevators that trap people for hours, electrical explosions that cut power to the building, and noise and vibration they call intolerable. Then in 2025, they filed again, this time alleging fraud and claiming nearly 1,900 cracks had been found across the tower's concrete facade. The developers deny it. They have called the building Manhattan's premier residence and said it has performed remarkably well. The case is still going. 28 witnesses, more than 4 million pages of documents. So what actually went wrong here? Is this bad workmanship, or is it something about the shape of the building itself? And why does almost every problem on that list trace back to the one thing the tower was sold on? Before we go in, every claim in this video is sourced to court filings and reporting on them, and everything alleged is clearly marked as alleged, because none of it has been decided yet. Getting that right takes longer than repeating headlines. Subscribing is what makes that time possible. It starts with a shape that had never really been built at this scale. Chapter 1. The shape of the problem. To understand this story, you have to understand what a super-slender tower actually is, and why New York started building them. Land in Midtown Manhattan is extraordinarily expensive, and the plots available are small. If you want to build something enormous on a small footprint, there is only one direction to go. 432 Park Avenue sits on the site of the old Drake Hotel. The tower is a square, roughly 93 feet on each side. It rises to 1,396 feet. Divide the height by the width, and you get a ratio of about 15:1. For comparison, the Empire State Building is nowhere near that. Most of the towers you picture when you think of a skyscraper are wide at the base relative to their height, because that is the stable way to build. 15:1 is a different category of structure. Engineers call these super-slender towers, and until recently, there were very few of them anywhere in the world. The problem with building this thin is not that it falls over. That is the thing people assume, and it is not the issue. The structure itself is engineered with enormous margins. The problem is movement. A tall, thin building in wind behaves like a diving board. It bends, it sways, it oscillates back and forth. And the taller and thinner it gets, the more it moves, and the slower that movement becomes. Everything in this video comes back to that single fact. A building that moves is a building where every system inside it has to tolerate movement. The engineers designing 432 Park knew all of this, and they built in solutions. The tower has open mechanical floors, double height gaps in the structure, spaced up the building, with no glass in them. Wind passes straight through, rather than pushing against a solid wall. In a super-slender tower, they are not. Then, the elevators. Court filings and reporting describe elevator malfunctions, including residents trapped for extended periods. Again, there is a physical reason this is harder in a tall, slender tower. Elevator systems run on rails and cables the full height of the shaft. If the shaft itself is flexing in the wind, alignment tolerances that would be trivial in a shorter building become a real engineering problem. Systems in super tall towers are typically designed to shut down in high wind as a safety measure. Then the water. This is the most heavily documented category in the filings. The complaint describes persistent flooding and water infiltration, including leaks in the elevator shaft at the 60th and 74th floors, and 35 separate units with water damage attributed to allegedly poor plumbing installation. It also describes water getting into the sub-basement and alleges that attempts to fix that problem made it worse. Ooh, plumbing in a 1,400-foot tower is genuinely difficult. Water has to be pumped in stages, and pressure has to be broken into zones, because the weight of a continuous column of water that tall would destroy ordinary fittings. Any weakness in that system does not stay local, it travels down. The filings also describe electrical failures, including explosions that knocked out power to residents. One of these was reported in June 2021, described at the time as the second such incident in 3 years. And then, the long tail of ordinary defects. Drywall cracks in ceilings, above doorways, and where walls meet ceilings. Air and water leaks at windows, peeling baseboards, misaligned joints, sliding doors that would not work properly, openings in grout joints. That section came from reading the actual court filings rather than news summaries of them, because the summaries tend to drop the specifics that make the pattern visible. Subscribe if you would rather have it that way too. What the New York Times noted when it first investigated this, in February 2021, is the observation that ties it together. The complaints may all connect back to the building's main selling point, its height. Chapter 3. 1,500 Defects. In September 2021, the Condominium Board filed suit in New York Supreme Court against the sponsor entity formed by the developers, CIM Group and Maclo Properties. The centerpiece of the claim was the figure produced by the board's engineering consultant. More than 1,500 identified construction and design defects in the building's common elements, and, according to the complaint, many of them describable as life safety issues. Reported damages figures for this first suit vary depending on what is being counted. Coverage cited $125 million as the estimated repair cost, while other reporting described the board as seeking $250 million plus punitive damages. Both numbers circulated. Neither is a settlement figure, because there has not been one. The developers responded firmly. The sponsor described the building as Manhattan's premier residence, and said it had performed remarkably well. It argued that virtually all new construction has maintenance and closeout items during a building's first period of occupancy, and said it remained committed to working with the Homeowners Association. The sponsor also alleged that its representatives had been prevented from accessing the building to make repairs, a claim the board's counsel rejected, arguing that the sponsor had repeatedly disregarded the safety protocols that govern repair work in New York skyscrapers. Then the case did what large construction disputes do. It expanded. The sponsor filed a third-party complaint against the construction manager. The construction manager filed its own third-party complaints against the companies that had supplied materials and services, including, per public filings, the supplier of the damping devices used in the tower's tuned mass damper system, which denied the allegations against it. By the time reporting caught up with the discovery process, the case had produced testimony from 28 witnesses and more than 4 million pages of documents. Reading 4 million pages is not something anyone does. But reading the docket entries, the third-party complaints, and the court's own published decisions is. And that is where the shape of this case is actually visible, rather than in the headlines. Subscribe if you want more of that. And while all of this was happening, something else was going on with the building itself. Chapter 4. The cracks. In 2025, the owners filed again. A second action, separate from the first. This one is more serious in character because it does not allege poor workmanship. It alleges concealment. According to the complaint, structurally significant defects in the tower's facade were known and not disclosed to buyers. The filing describes what it characterizes as a far-reaching fraud, and reporting on it referenced thousands of severe cracks in the concrete exterior, with figures approaching 1,900 cracks cited in coverage of the claim. The complaint attributes the problem to the facade concrete itself. That distinctive bright white exterior, the flat grid of square windows that makes the building instantly recognizable, was, according to the filing, an experimental mix chosen substantially for its appearance. The owners are seeking more than $165 million. The complaint names not only the developers, but architecture and engineering firms involved in the project. The developers reject all of it. CIM Group has denied concealing facade cracks from buyers and has moved to have the complaint dismissed entirely. It has to be said clearly at this point that none of this has been proven. These are allegations in a pending case, contested by the defendants, and a court has not ruled on the substance. What has been decided are procedural questions, and one of those went against the developer side in June 2026. A New York appellate court rejected Harry Macklow's attempt to have the condominium board cover his legal costs and any judgments against him. His argument had rested on his having served as a board member between 2016 and 2020. The appellate ruling reversed a lower court decision from 2024 that had gone in his favor. That is a ruling about who pays for lawyers. It is not a ruling about whether the building is defective. It is worth being precise about the difference, because coverage of these cases often is not. Meanwhile, the litigation has done something to the building that no engineering report could. Sales slowed. Owners trying to sell reported having to cut prices. A publicized defect case attaches itself to an address and does not come off. Chapter 5. Is it the building or is it the idea? Here is the question worth ending on, and it is bigger than one tower. There are two competing explanations for what happened at 432 Park. The first is the one the complaints argue. This was a badly executed building. Poor supervision, poor installation, defective materials, and, in the second suit, deliberate concealment of what was known. The second is the one the sponsor argues. This is a very large, very complex new building that had the teething problems very large new buildings have, amplified by residents with unusually high expectations and unusually good lawyers. A court will eventually decide between them. Nobody making YouTube videos gets to. But there is a third question sitting underneath both, and it is the interesting one. Almost every complaint on that list is a problem that gets harder as a building gets taller and thinner. Noise from movement. Elevators in a flexing shaft. Water pressure over 1,400 feet. Finishes that have to tolerate a structure bending in the wind. None of those are exotic problems. They are ordinary building problems, made much harder by geometry. And 432 Park was not the last of these. When this litigation began, other super-slender towers were already going up along the same stretch of Manhattan, taller in some cases, and thinner. The industry was building this shape faster than it was accumulating experience with how the shape behaves once people are living inside it. That is what makes this case worth following, even if you will never set foot in the building. It is not really a story about whether one developer cut corners. It is the first serious stress test of a building type that New York committed to before anyone had lived in one for very long. The tower is still there. People still live in it. From the street, it looks exactly as it was designed to look. A plain white grid going up further than seems reasonable, visible from most of Manhattan, entirely still to the naked eye. Whatever is happening inside it, you cannot see any of it from the pavement. Here is what I keep coming back to. Every problem in those filings is something engineers already knew gets worse with height and slenderness. So the question is not whether anyone was surprised. It is whether the shape was pushed further than the systems inside it were ready for. What do you think? Bad building or a building type that ran ahead of itself? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories about buildings that were finished, occupied, and quietly hiding something, subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is for.